The two men came to Blue Magnolia with an official closure order and the confidence of people who expected obedience. The injured stranger washing dishes behind Nia Brooks looked at their paperwork, once spoke 6 quiet words in Japanese, and watched both men leave without collecting a signature. Nia had given him a bed because he could not remember his own surname. Now she had to ask why men connected to Yokohama's Underworld seemed to remember him. If you're listening from anywhere tonight, tell me where you're listening from in the comments. 48 hours earlier, Daigo Mori had sat at the smallest table in Blue Magnolia and explained why refusing him was becoming unreasonable. He wore a charcoal suit, cut too well for the neighborhood, and placed a cream-colored purchase agreement beside Nia's untouched coffee. Shindo Urban Holdings has increased the offer by 12%. Nia kept sorting supplier invoices. That makes 3 increases. It makes this the generous one. She looked up. Mori was not a thug. That would have made him easier to deal with. He was a redevelopment executive with municipal contacts, bank relationships, and a talent for making coercion resemble ordinary commerce. Blue Magnolia occupied a narrow corner property near Yokohama's waterfront, where old warehouses were being replaced by glass towers and luxury residences. Shindo already controlled most of the block. Nia's Café was one of the few remaining properties standing between the company and a contiguous development site. Mori had looked at her situation and reached a practical conclusion. Foreign owner, independent business, no corporate parent, weak cash reserves. Eventually, she would sell. "I'm not interested," Nia said. "You may become interested when maintaining this property costs more than owning it is worth. That sounds less like advice every time you say it." Mori gave the invoices in her hands a brief glance. "Restaurants fail for ordinary reasons, Ms. Brooks. Suppliers change terms. Banks reconsider exposure. Neighborhoods change." That was almost a confession. Almost. Nia slid the agreement back across the table. Mori left it there. "Keep it," he said. "You may want to remember the number." By evening, one of her produce suppliers demanded payment before delivery. The next morning, the company handling Blue Magnolia's commercial waste canceled its contract, citing route restructuring. By lunch, a lender who had renewed her small operating line twice without difficulty requested additional financial documentation. Separately, each problem was plausible. Together, they were a pattern. Nia had spent 7 years in forensic accounting before opening the cafe. Fraud rarely announced itself with an obvious lie. It preferred repetition disguised as coincidence. She spread the new invoices across the office desk after closing. 3 supposedly unrelated companies used different names but identical formatting in their reference codes. 2 listed administrative addresses on the same floor of the same office building. Mori had assumed she would see pressure. Nia saw architecture. She still could not prove who had built it. At nearly 1 in the morning, she took a bag of kitchen waste toward the rear alley and found a man sitting against the brick wall beside the service entrance. At first, she thought he was drunk. Then, he tried to stand. His hand slipped against the wall. He caught himself before falling, but not quickly enough to hide the effort. He was Japanese, perhaps late 30s, dressed in trousers and a white shirt that had once belonged beneath an expensive suit. One cuff was torn. There was dried blood near his hairline, but not enough to explain the blank concentration with which he studied the alley. Nia stopped several feet away. "You need an ambulance." He looked at her as though the question required translation. "I don't know." "That wasn't complicated. I know what an ambulance is." "Good start." He touched his pocket, searched another, then looked genuinely unsettled. "No wallet. Phone." He shook his head. "Name." That took longer. "Ren." Last name, nothing. Nia watched him attempt to retrieve it. Not refuse. Retrieve. His expression changed in a way she recognized from people searching a computer for a file that should exist and did not. "I don't know." She should have called the police and kept the situation simple. Instead, she asked him the year. He answered correctly. Prime Minister. Correct. Yokohama. Correct. His address. Nothing. Family. Nothing. Occupation. Nothing. Nia eventually brought him inside, sat him near the kitchen, cleaned the shallow cut at his temple, and told him the arrangement would last one night. Ren accepted this without protest. That interested her more than gratitude would have. Men accustomed to helplessness usually explained themselves too much. Men accustomed to authority often did not know what to do when explanation became necessary. Ren slept in the small room above the café. The next morning, Nia found him downstairs before opening. He had already stacked the chairs she normally moved herself. You shouldn't be working. You gave me a room. For one night. Then I owe one morning. His tone was matter-of-fact. Nia pointed him toward the dish station. If you break anything, your debt gets larger. He almost smiled. By noon, she noticed the first oddity. Whenever customers entered, Ren glanced toward the front window before looking at the person. Not at their face, at the reflection behind them. During his break, he selected the only chair that gave him a view of both the front entrance and the corridor leading toward the kitchen. Later, when Nia asked him to bring a delivery through the rear entrance, he reached for the handle, lifted the door slightly, then turned it. The lock opened cleanly. Nia stopped. That door sticks. Ren looked down at his hand. Yes. I didn't tell you how. He tried the handle again, as though the answer might be inside the mechanism. I don't know. Nia said nothing. That evening, he helped bundle receipts. Without asking, he arranged them by vendor date and payment category, using the same reconciliation sequence Nia had learned at her former accounting firm. She changed the order after he left, then changed it back. The following afternoon, Daigo Mori returned. This time, he did not sit. Two men accompanied him, both wearing municipal-style jackets and carrying a document folder. Routine compliance issue, Mori said. Nia took the papers. The notice alleged an emergency sanitation violation, serious enough to suspend Blue Magnolia's operations pending inspection. Nia read it twice. The language was technically plausible. The timing was not. Which department authorized this? One of the men indicated the seal. You can read it. I can also call them. You can do that after the premises are closed. Ren was carrying a tray from the kitchen. Mori barely looked at him. Employee temporary? Help, Nia said. Then he should stay out of regulatory matters. That was Mori's second mistake. Ren stopped beside the counter. His attention had gone to the document. May I? Nia hesitated, then handed it over. Ren studied the seal first, then the lower margin, then the identification cards clipped to the men's jackets. His thumb moved over a small printed mark near the corner of the page. You shouldn't use this code anymore, he said. The taller man frowned. What? This authorization sequence was replaced. Mori's expression lost some of its patience. Mr. Ren, whatever your experience may be. Ren ignored him. He looked at the second man's badge. The contractor number is wrong, too. The man took one step closer. Give me the document. Ren did not. Something in his posture changed, not dramatically, not theatrically. He simply stopped, looking confused. For several seconds, the injured stranger Nia had found in the alley seemed to know exactly where everyone in the room stood. Then Ren spoke 6 words in Japanese. Nia understood only one of them. Tsukishiro. The taller man went still. His partner looked immediately toward Mori. Mori did not seem to understand what had happened. I said, take the notice. Neither man moved. Ren handed the folder back. You were never here. The taller man accepted it. Then both men left. No threat, no argument, no signature. Mori stared after them. For the first time since he had entered Blue Magnolia, he looked uncertain about the balance of power. What did you say to them? Nia asked. Ren was still watching the doorway. I don't know. She turned toward him. You clearly knew. I knew the words. That isn't the same thing. Now his hands were trembling, only slightly, but Nia saw it. Ren looked down at them. I don't know why they listened. Mori left without another offer. That night, Nia locked the cafe early. She searched the contractor number from the forged notice, then followed company registrations through 2 shell entities and a private security firm. One name appeared repeatedly in archived reporting. The Tsukishiro Union. Nia opened another search window. Photographs appeared, black cars, corporate entrances, men shielding their faces from cameras. Then, one image stopped her. A formal business portrait. The man wore a dark suit and an expression far harder than anything she had seen across her kitchen. But the face was Ren's. So was the small damaged watch visible beneath his cuff. The caption identified him as Renji Arata, controlling shareholder of Arata Maritime Group and acting chairman of the Tsukishiro Union, missing under unexplained circumstances. Nia slowly looked through the office doorway. Ren stood at the sink, sleeves rolled to his forearms, washing the last plates because she had told him nobody stayed at Blue Magnolia for free. The stranger she had taken in was not merely connected to the people squeezing her business. According to the photograph on her screen, he had once been the man they answered to. Nia did not confront him with the photograph until the front door was locked and the kitchen burners were off. She carried her laptop to the stainless steel counter and turned the screen toward him. Ren stopped drying a plate. The photograph showed him stepping from a black sedan outside a Tokyo hotel, surrounded by men in suits. The caption beneath it named Renji Arata as controlling shareholder of Arata Maritime Group and acting chairman of the Tsukishiro Union. Ren set the plate down carefully. That's me. You tell me. He leaned closer. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then his fingers closed around the edge of the counter, an elevator opening onto a silent corridor, a table covered with documents, men standing when he entered, his own hand signing something while another man waited beside him. Then the images broke apart. Ren stepped away from the laptop. I remember people moving when I walked into rooms. That doesn't narrow things down much. They weren't moving away. Nia studied him. Were they afraid of you? I don't know. It was the first answer he had given her that sounded worse than a lie. She closed the laptop. If you are Renji Arata, people are already looking for you. I should leave. That's not a plan. It gets me out of your building. And where do you go? He had no answer. Nia continued before he could offer another gesture disguised as sacrifice. If someone followed you here leaving, could lead them straight back. If nobody followed you walking into the city with no memory, makes you easier to find. Ren looked toward the rear entrance. So I stay. For now. Under what condition? The question came too naturally, as if agreements were easier for him than uncertainty. You remember something, you tell me, even if it makes you look bad. Ren nodded. No, deciding what I need to know. Another nod. It was not trust. It was a contract between two people who had reasons not to trust each other. The next morning, Nia tested whether he meant it. She sent him to buy ginger and cooking oil from a market 3 streets away. He returned by a different route. Why, I thought someone was behind me. Nia put down the knife she was using. Did you see them? No. Then why think it Ren took a paper napkin and drew 3 intersections? A man in a gray coat passed me here. Then again here. Same pace, different side of the street. Could be coincidence. Yes, but you changed direction. Yes. Did he follow? No. That answered one question. Ren knew surveillance. It created another. What kind of life taught someone to detect a tail before he could remember his own address? Later during lunch preparation, a chef's knife slipped from Nia's wet hand. Ren caught her wrist before she could reach for it with the other. His free hand intercepted the handle against the counter. The motion was finished before either of them seemed to understand it had started. He released her immediately. Nia looked at the knife, then at him. Where did you learn that? I don't know. This time he did not sound confused. He sounded disgusted. Ren carried the knife to the sink and left it there. For the rest of the shift, he kept his hands occupied with onions. Nia noticed. She also noticed that he never used what he had just revealed to impress her. That mattered. By afternoon, Renji Arata's disappearance had moved beyond underworld gossip. Business publications were reporting uncertainty inside Arata Maritime. A temporary governance committee had assumed expanded authority. At its center was Masato Kuroda, described publicly as Renji's longtime advisor and one of the few men trusted across both the commercial and private sides of the Arata organization. Nia read the filings instead of the articles. Public statements were designed to be believed. Money was designed to arrive somewhere. Over the previous week, voting proxies had shifted toward companies connected to Kuroda. Several transactions authorized before Renji's disappearance had been suspended. "You know him?" Nia asked. She showed Ren a photograph of Kuroda. The reaction was smaller than she expected. Recognition without memory. Kuroda. That came quickly. "He taught me shogi." Nia waited. Ren pressed 2 fingers against his temple. That's all. It was enough. Kuroda was not simply an executive who had benefited from Renji's absence. He belonged to the part of Ren's life that still survived underneath the missing years. Nia continued tracing filings. What she found over the next 3 nights made less sense than the disappearance. For 18 months before Renji vanished, money had been moving out of businesses, repeatedly named in old investigations involving coercive lending protection arrangements and opaque construction partnerships. Not stolen. Transferred. One logistics subsidiary had been placed into an employee trust. A pension reserve previously exposed to high-risk internal loans had been separated into a protected vehicle. Several predatory debt portfolios had quietly been reduced or written down. Ren sat beside her after closing reading authorization pages, bearing his own signature. "I did this? Your signature did. That isn't the same thing." No, she respected him a little for saying it. A man desperate to recover a respectable version of himself would have claimed the documents immediately. Ren did not. He read the dates again. Why would the chairman of Tsukishiro weaken Tsukishiro? That's the useful question. The next day brought a smaller test. Nia discovered that the replacement seafood distributor keeping Blue Magnolia supplied during Shindo's pressure campaign was financed through a company linked indirectly to Arata Maritime. The connection was legal. That did not make her comfortable. She called the distributor and canceled the account. Afterward, Ren checked the inventory. "You have enough for 2 days." "I know. They didn't threaten you." "I know. The company may not even know where its financing comes from." "I know that, too." Ren looked toward the empty shelf where the next delivery should have gone. "You could keep using them. Nobody would know." He realized what he had said as soon as the words left him. Nia gave him a flat look. "I would." That evening, Ren stayed after closing and helped prepare stock for a reduced menu. He did not offer money. He did not mention Arata Maritime. He peeled potatoes until nearly midnight. Something between them changed there. Not forgiveness, not trust, but Nia stopped seeing him only as a dangerous question sleeping above her restaurant, and Ren began listening when she made decisions he would have solved differently. 2 nights later, he was helping bundle receipts when he reorganized them again. Vendor first, then date, then payment classification. Nia watched his hands. That method. He stopped. "What about it?" "My old firm used it. I thought it was normal. It isn't." Ren looked down at the receipts as though they had accused him of something. When Nia moved toward the cash register, he glanced at the brass housing. It was the 3rd time she had caught him doing it. "You keep looking at that." "I know. Why I don't know." His answer irritated her less than it had before. That was probably a mistake. Near midnight, Nia found the document that changed the scale of everything. It was buried inside a series of restructuring filings Renji had authorized 6 weeks before his disappearance. An emergency protective mechanism allowed the controlling shareholder to suspend certain property transfers if affiliated acquisitions appeared linked to coercion, undisclosed conflicts, or compromised financing. Nia read it twice. Then she pulled up the redevelopment map. Blue Magnolia's block fell inside the protected structure. Not just her cafe. Every remaining independent business Shindo was trying to acquire. Ren stood behind her. This could stop them temporarily. How temporarily? Long enough to force review. He looked at the authorization field. What does it require? Nia turned the screen toward him. Your authentication. Ren said nothing. She continued. The moment you use it, this goes through systems controlled by people currently trying to decide whether you're dead, missing, or incapable. He understood. Saving Blue Magnolia was no longer a question of whether Ren possessed power. It was a question of what using that power would tell the people who had taken his place. Nia closed the file. If you activate this, everyone inside Arata Maritime who is watching for your signature will know Renji Arata is alive. Ren looked at the redevelopment map. For the first time since she had learned his real name, the most important question was no longer who he had been. It was what he was willing to expose himself to become now. Ren waited until the last customer left before asking Nia to open the emergency authorization again. She did not. You already know what it does. I know what it can stop. And I know what it exposes. He stood across the counter from her Blue Magnolia's redevelopment map between them. Shindo-controlled properties were marked across most of the waterfront block. The remaining independent businesses looked like small gaps in a structure already designed around their disappearance. Nia tapped one of them. This isn't only my cafe anymore. If you activate that mechanism, you freeze transfers for the laundromat, the repair shop, the noodle place everyone's still refusing to sell. That sounds like a reason to use it. It's also a reason not to pretend this is protection without a cost. Ren looked at the map again. If I do nothing, Mori gets them. If you do something, Kuroda gets you. Ren did not answer immediately. That was the part of him Nia had begun to trust, not because he obeyed her, but because he had stopped treating disagreement as disloyalty. She opened the authorization screen. Once your signature enters the system, you don't get to become anonymous again. I'm already not anonymous. You are in this room. Ren looked around the cafe. The faded menu board, the stack of clean bowls, the brass cash register he kept noticing for reasons neither of them understood. Perhaps that was why he finally made the decision. Not because Blue Magnolia belonged to Nia, because anonymity had begun to feel like another privilege purchased by leaving other people exposed. Activate the whole block, he said. Nia studied him. Not just this property. No. She entered the transaction data. Ren supplied the authentication sequence his hands seemed to remember, before his mind did. The system asked for confirmation. He pressed it. By morning, Shindo Urban Holdings had lost control of its timetable. Pending acquisitions were frozen for emergency conflict review. Several lenders suspended connected transfers. Businesses expecting final eviction notices instead received notices that ownership changes could not proceed until the financing structure was examined. Daigo Mori called Nia before 9. What did you do? She was measuring coffee. I own a restaurant, Mr. Mori. Apparently you've forgotten. This review is temporary. So is your patience. You don't understand what you've interfered with. Nia glanced toward Ren, who was carrying boxes from the storeroom. I understand invoices better than you thought. She ended the call. For the first time since Shindo began applying pressure, the neighborhood had space to breathe. The victory lasted 6 hours. Then, Renji Arata's name began trending. Not because anyone announced his survival, because an authentication reserved for Arata Maritime's controlling shareholder had entered a protected corporate system overnight. Kuroda understood immediately. By evening, financial reporters were asking whether Renji Arata was alive. By the next morning, the question had changed. Was Renji Arata Mentally competent statements from Arata Maritime describe the missing chairman as having suffered significant instability before his disappearance. Anonymous sources claimed his restructuring program had damaged profitable companies without rational justification. Then, photographs of Nia appeared online. One showed her entering Blue Magnolia, another showed Ren through the front window behind her. The headline did not call her an accountant. It called her a cafe owner sheltering a missing billionaire. Some reports implied romance, others implied manipulation. A few did both. By lunch, 3 regular customers canceled reservations. Nia deleted the messages without comment. Ren watched her do it. "I can leave." She kept slicing peppers. "We've discussed this. I can issue a statement saying you had nothing to do with my decisions." That would be a lie. It would protect you. No, it would make Kuroda the person who gets to define what happened here. Ren placed both palms against the work table. "There are other ways." Nia stopped cutting. "What ways?" He did not answer quickly enough. That was answer enough. "People who still follow you. Some, and you'd send them after Kuroda." "I said there are ways. You didn't say legal ones." "He is using courts, corporate boards, and public opinion because he thinks I won't use what he understands." Nia set the knife down. "And if you do?" He stops. "No." He changes tactics. Then you change tactics. Then eventually the winner is whoever can force more people to obey. Ren turned away. Nia did not let him escape the argument. "If your solution to a corrupt organization is becoming the unquestioned boss of it again, what exactly did all those transfers mean?" That landed. Not because she raised her voice, because neither of them knew the answer. Ren spent the afternoon in the kitchen without speaking much. Near closing, he found Nia reviewing the supplier files Maury's campaign had generated. She had begun linking addresses, bank routing patterns, and ownership registrations. Maury's carelessness was becoming useful. He had assumed he was pressuring a woman who understood food costs and rent. He had never considered that every invoice he pushed through her business was another piece of evidence. Nia showed Ren 3 corporate chains converging on a Shindo financing vehicle. Kuroda not directly, but connected. Likely. "I need more." Ren looked at the growing diagram. "If you release this, I could hurt Shindo. Only Shindo." That was the problem. Nia had already found legitimate warehouse employees' pension accounts and subcontractors tied into the same corporate web. Pulling one thread too hard might collapse businesses whose workers had no idea what Tsukishiro was. "We don't have evidence," she said. "We have a weapon with civilians standing behind the target." Ren understood the distinction immediately. That frightened her more than if he had argued. Later, while cleaning after midnight, he said, "I'm afraid to remember." Nia looked over. He was not asking for sympathy. "What part?" "What I did." The faucet ran between them. "I keep finding evidence that I tried to change something." "That doesn't mean I was good before I changed it?" "No. What if Kuroda's accusations are partly true?" "They probably are." Ren looked at her. Nia continued, "You didn't build an organization like that without becoming responsible for things you won't like remembering." He gave a short breath that was almost a laugh. "You're terrible at reassurance." "I'm not trying to reassure you." "What are you trying to do? Keep you from confusing guilt with destiny." He considered that, then nodded once. The next evening, while closing the register, Ren stopped beside Nia. His attention fixed on the brass casing again. This time he reached toward it. "Wait. For what I remember, touching this." Nia removed the cash drawer. Behind it, one panel sat a fraction higher than the others. She found a screwdriver. The brass plate came free. Inside was a small, encrypted storage device wrapped in black protective film. Ren stared at it. "I put that there." "You remember?" "No." He looked almost angry at the difference. "But my hands do." They took it upstairs. Before they could finish examining the encryption, an emergency filing appeared in Nia's corporate alerts. Masato Kuroda had petitioned for a formal competency proceeding. If successful, Renji Arata would lose effective control over Arata Maritime. The restructuring could be reversed permanently. The protected block could be released back into Shindo's acquisition system. Ren's identity itself would become evidence against him. Nia turned back to the storage device. They tried several passwords. Nothing worked. Then, she noticed the formatting field. It followed an old audit convention she had not seen since leaving her former firm. Nia entered the sequence. The device unlocked. A video file appeared. She opened it. Renji Arata filled the screen dressed in the same dark suit from the photograph that had revealed his identity. He looked directly into the camera. Then he said two words that stopped both of them. Nia Brooks. The recording had been made 3 days before Ren lost his memory. The man on the recording was Ren, but Nia understood immediately why the distinction mattered. His hair was neatly combed, his suit immaculate, his expression composed in the way of someone accustomed to deciding what happened next. If this file has been opened, Renji Arata said, then the restructuring failed, or I am no longer able to complete it. Beside Nia, Ren did not move. The recording continued. Nia Brooks worked for Wexler Forensic Advisory 7 years ago. She audited Seihoku Logistics under engagement number 4187C. Nia stared at the screen. She remembered the audit. A shipping subsidiary had concealed millions in payments through false maintenance contracts. She had refused instructions to alter the findings. Her own firm had called her judgment inflexible. Within months, the clients disappeared, and so did her promotion track. She had resigned before they could make the decision for her. What she had never known was who owned Seihoku Logistics. Renji supplied the answer. Seihoku was indirectly controlled by Arata Maritime. Nia turned toward Ren. He looked as shocked as she felt. On screen, his former self continued. Miss Brooks was offered compensation to amend her conclusion. She refused. Her refusal cost her position. Ren whispered, I knew. You knew exactly who I was. I don't remember this. That doesn't make it untrue. The recording explained that Renji had spent 18 months separating legitimate Arata companies from Tsukishiro's criminal revenue structure. He expected internal resistance. He also expected that anyone inside the organization capable of understanding the restructuring might eventually be compromised. So he had chosen an outsider. Not randomly. Nia. Someone who could read the records and whose integrity had already been tested at personal cost. 3 days before his disappearance, Renji had entered Blue Magnolia after closing. He had watched Nia reconcile the day's receipts. He had hidden the encrypted drive behind the cash register. If his internal reform collapsed, evidence would remain beyond Tsukishiro's normal chain of custody. The video ended with one instruction. Do not trust any claim merely because it carries my name. Verify the records. The screen went black. For several seconds, Nia heard only the refrigerator compressor downstairs. Then every strange detail rearranged itself. Ren lifting the rear door before turning the handle. He had done it before. His fixation on the brass register. He had installed the drive. The receipt sequence identical to her former firm's method. He had studied her audit. The broken fragment of memory. Nia alone beneath the kitchen light. It had not belonged to the days after she found him. Renji had been inside Blue Magnolia before she knew his face. Even his return to the alley after losing his memory no longer looked like chance. His mind had forgotten the safe place. Something deeper had remembered the route. Nia removed the storage device from the laptop. You made me part of this. Ren looked at her. He did. She gave him a hard look. You don't get to hide behind grammar. He absorbed that without protest. No, you placed evidence from a criminal organization inside my business without asking me. Yes. You decided I could carry the risk because you had decided I was trustworthy. Yes. And somehow that was supposed to make it acceptable. No. That answer made her angrier because there was nothing easy to fight. Ren did not defend himself, did not say he was different now, did not tell her the plan had been necessary. Nia pointed toward the stairs. I need you to leave. He looked once toward the laptop, then back at her. All right, you're not going to argue. You asked me to leave. It was the first time he had protected her by giving up control of what happened next. He packed what little he owned and walked out through the front door. By morning, Masato Kuroda had accelerated the competency proceeding. His legal team filed statements describing Renji's restructuring as evidence of deteriorating judgment. They argued that the chairman's disappearance, memory impairment, and sudden interference in Shindo's acquisitions proved that he could no longer exercise fiduciary authority. Kuroda did not need to kill him. He needed institutions to pronounce him incapable. Ren spent that morning somewhere Nia did not know, while she sat in Blue Magnolia, surrounded by the records Renji had left behind. She could have stopped. Instead, she opened Mori's supplier files. Her anger at Ren did not make Kuroda honest. For the next 30 hours, Nia reconstructed the financial chain. The invoices Mori had considered harmless revealed routing numbers. The routing numbers led to holding companies. The holding companies led to Shindo financing vehicles. Those vehicles overlapped with entities Kuroda had used to reverse Renji's protected transfers. More importantly, Nia separated the legitimate assets from the criminal ones. Pension funds, employee trusts, shipping contracts, warehouses employing people who had never attended a Tsukishiro meeting and never benefited from Kuroda's schemes. Dumping everything publicly would destroy Kuroda. It could also destroy them. So Nia built something narrower, evidence precise enough to remove Kuroda's control without detonating the entire corporate structure. Ren, meanwhile, did what she could not. Fragments of memory were returning around people rather than places. He recognized which directors feared Kuroda, which executives had signed documents under pressure, which Tsukishiro captains had privately supported separating legitimate businesses from protection revenue. 2 of those men offered to restore Renji by the older method, remove Kuroda, take back the chair. End the dispute before any court could decide it. Ren refused. One of them asked why. Because then, Kuroda is wrong about himself, Ren said, but right about me. Instead, Ren asked them to testify. No promises of restored rank, no protection from consequences. Several refused. Enough agreed. At the emergency corporate session, Kuroda looked almost relieved when Ren entered. An impaired chairman fighting to reclaim his empire was exactly the man Kuroda had prepared to defeat. Then, Nia entered behind outside counsel, carrying a documented transaction map. Kuroda's relief disappeared. She did not speak about loyalty romance or the night she found Ren in the alley. She spoke in numbers. The transfers Renji authorized before his disappearance followed a consistent restructuring pattern. Kuroda's reversals did not. Funds repeatedly moved toward entities he controlled. Shindo's acquisition campaign had been financed through those same structures. Mori's own documentation connected the pressure on Blue Magnolia's block to Kuroda's consolidation plan. Then, the directors Ren had contacted authenticated what the spreadsheets could not show: which signatures had been coerced, which votes had been manipulated, which independent companies answered directly to Kuroda. Kuroda tried one final argument. All of this proves why Arata cannot remain chairman. Ren stood. I agree. The room stopped. Ren signed the authorization completing the protected transfers. Then he placed another document beside it. His resignation. Effective once the legitimate restructuring was secured, he also waived internal protections that might have shielded him from investigations into conduct during his own leadership. Kuroda had built his entire case around the claim that Renji was destroying the organization because he was desperate to keep power. Ren destroyed that argument by surrendering the power himself. Several men who had been prepared to support Kuroda withdrew before the session ended. There was no throne left worth fighting for in the form they expected. By evening, Kuroda's authority had collapsed beneath the fraud evidence, the witness statements, and the transfer structure he could no longer reverse. Tsukishiro did not disappear, but the financial machinery that allowed one man to command its legitimate empire and criminal network together had been broken. Ren walked out without the chairmanship, without certainty about what investigations would follow, and without the organization that had once made his name sufficient. Nia waited outside. He stopped several feet from her. "Thank you." She shook her head. "I didn't do it for you." "I know." That was why she believed him. Ren did not ask whether he could return to Blue Magnolia. He did not ask whether she forgave him. He simply left, and for the first time since she had found him behind her kitchen, Nia understood his absence not as abandonment, but as the first protection he had ever offered her that required him to give something up. 3 weeks after Ren resigned, the black cars stopped appearing outside Blue Magnolia. Nia noticed because she had spent months pretending not to notice them. The waterfront did not return to what it had been. Shindo Urban Holdings abandoned the acquisition package after investigators froze several financing vehicles connected to Kuroda's consolidation scheme. The laundromat renewed its lease. The repair shop reopened negotiations with its landlord. The noodle restaurant across the street replaced the red sale notice in its window with a handwritten lunch menu. Blue Magnolia survived. That did not mean it escaped unchanged. Some customers came once simply to see the café from the news. They ordered coffee, whispered about Nia, photographed the brass register, and left. She hated them, more than the customers who never returned. When a television producer offered her enough money to cover 6 months of operating expenses for an exclusive interview, she declined before he finished describing the segment. She had spent years watching powerful people decide what her work meant. She was not going to let survival become another product someone else owned. Mori disappeared from Shindo's public leadership page first. The formal announcement came later. He had been removed pending review of acquisitions, authorized through compromised financing structures. There was no dramatic arrest, no photograph of him in handcuffs, no satisfying collapse. Nia preferred it that way. His ending was quieter and more precise. He had built his campaign on the assumption that the woman running a small restaurant would never understand the documents passing through her hands. Those documents had become part of the record that destroyed his position. Kuroda's fall was less simple. The evidence from the emergency session triggered investigations into fraudulent transfers, coercive corporate voting, and concealed beneficial ownership. His authority inside Arata Maritime ended almost immediately, but the legal process moved at the speed. Institutions always moved when powerful people had expensive attorneys. Ren did not complain about that. He was too busy answering questions about himself. His resignation had not purchased immunity. Over the following months, fragments of his memory returned under interviews, records, names, and places. Not all of them were useful. Some were worse than not remembering. He recalled approving loans whose conditions he had never examined closely enough. He remembered meetings where fear had been treated as operational efficiency. He remembered signing off on men whose methods he had chosen not to question because their results had benefited the organization. The restructuring had been real. So had the years before it. Nia learned most of this through documents she was legally permitted to see, not from Ren. That distinction mattered. He no longer arrived at Blue Magnolia carrying explanations she had not asked for. When they needed to speak about testimony, they spoke. When they did not, he stayed away. At first, Nia thought the distance would make everything easier. Instead, it removed the crisis that had allowed them to avoid the more difficult question. Did she want him when he was no longer stranded above her kitchen? Did he want her when protecting Blue Magnolia no longer gave him a reason to remain near it? There was no immediate danger left to answer for them. One afternoon, Nia finally replaced the rear door lock. The old mechanism had been sticking for years. The repairman fitted a new one that opened without lifting the handle first. When she tested it, she thought of Ren doing the motion automatically on his first morning in the cafe. A memory without a memory. She kept the old brass cash register. The panel Renji had removed never sat perfectly flush again. There was a thin scratch beside one screw where Nia had opened it to find the drive. She could have replaced that too. She did not. The register still worked. So did she. Nearly 6 months after the corporate session, Ren came to Blue Magnolia shortly before closing. He entered through the front. No driver waited outside. No security detail occupied a nearby table. He wore a plain dark coat and carried nothing except the repaired watch that had once given Nia the only name he could remember. She poured him coffee. "You're leaving," she said. "For a while. Tokyo first, then Osaka. There are hearings." She nodded. Ren did not tell her everything would be fine. That would have insulted both of them. Investigators had already informed him that some matters could lead to formal charges. Other conduct might never be prosecuted, but would remain attached to his name. Arata Maritime had survived only by becoming something he could no longer control. Major properties had been sold. Independent oversight had been imposed. Several logistics subsidiaries were being transferred into employee ownership. Protected pension structures remained intact because Nia's analysis had separated them before Kuroda's fraud was exposed. Tsukishiro still existed in fragments, but no chairman could again command its criminal and legitimate machinery through one financial center. Ren had destroyed the throne before anyone else could sit in it. He took a drink of coffee. "I need to say something." Nia waited. "I made decisions for you before I knew you. Then after I lost my memory, I kept thinking protection meant reducing your choices. You were improving near the end. Barely." That almost made her smile. Ren continued, "I can't promise my past won't reach into whatever comes next. I can't promise you won't hear my name attached to things you hate. I already have." "I know." He looked directly at her. "But I can promise I won't decide what risk you're allowed to accept because I think I know better." That was the first promise he had made her. That did not sound like protection. It sounded like equality. Nia reached beneath the counter. She placed a key beside his coffee. Ren looked at it. The upstairs room. No, the back door front. He understood. The first key she had given him access to a place where he could hide. This one meant something else. "If you come back, Nia said you don't come back because you need somewhere safe." Ren picked up the key. For a moment she thought he would pocket it. Instead, he put it back on the counter. "You offered it." "Yes, that doesn't mean I've earned it." He left before she could decide whether the answer annoyed her or moved her. Perhaps it did both. 11 months later, Blue Magnolia closed on a rainy Thursday at 9:30. Nia sat alone beneath the kitchen light reconciling invoices. The new rear door no longer stuck. The brass register still carried its scratch. Outside, no black car waited at the curb. The bell above the front entrance rang. Ren walked in. He looked older than the man she had found in the alley, and lighter than the chairman in the photograph. Neither description meant innocent. That had never been the point. Nia glanced toward the small hook beside the register. The spare key was gone. Ren placed it on the counter between them. "I thought I should use the door properly once before assuming I still could." Nia looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned the lock behind him and went back to the invoices. Ren took off his coat. Without asking where anything belonged, he walked into the kitchen and began washing the cups left beside the sink. This time, he was not paying for a room, and Nia did not tell him to leave. Power could open almost any door. Trust was knowing you were still allowed to knock. Subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what you think really changed them.